Hello everyone, I am Tessellating Hexagons and you're not watching the Disney Channel. This is Bug Fables, and this is post-commentary. I bought an Iron Seed and I put it on Kabu. Now, why am I being so snappy and snippy and getting to the point? Well, this is a supplementary episode because the main meat of this episode took like an hour and a half. So if you don't have time for that, fine, here's the cut-down version. So, the order of the day is we're going into the little cave that's just down here, which the cave has been open to us since as long as we've been able to go this way, and we've been able to do the contents of the cave ever since we completed Chapter 3. I've saved it because it's the Cave of Trials. It's basically the Pit of 100 Trials, except there's 50. We're doing a lot of fighting, is what I'm getting at. And I'm cutting through all the fluff here and now because, as I said, it's a lengthy process. So while we're viewing all this happening in the background, here is my current medal loadout, which you can see my thought process in real time if you watch the full-fat version of this episode, because this is original commentary. This commentary is completely divorced from any and all commentary I did for the main episode. So consider this a supplement, because the only thing that's the same is the footage, but once we get into the fights, we'll be speeding up. So yes, the whole point of this is you fight 50 waves of enemies, or 51 under certain conditions. There is an optional secret super boss, which I will not be showing in this episode, but I will be coming back to later on in the series, so don't worry about that for now. So, for the purpose of that, 50 consecutive regular enemy battles, regular enemies only, no mini-bosses, no regular bosses, no super bosses, apart from the exception I just mentioned, but that's not this episode, so don't worry about it. And I believe it covers every regular type of enemy in the game. So let's get right into it, speed up mode, and if you see me being slightly awkward in my timing, like sitting there and thinking for a moment, either I'm strategizing or I was saying something in the original commentary of this episode. Which, as I said, fully available. I'll link to it in the end screen of this episode and in the video description and all that good stuff. But yes, what was I saying? Pretty much every regular enemy in the game, every 10 floors or 10 rounds, whatever, you get a reward, and I would say it's worth it, but really it's a test of how good you are with the game and how you interface with your medals. That's why I went to great lengths to show you my medal loadout before I went into this. Because I did find myself pondering in the original recording that this kind of is the ultimate demonstration of how beautiful the medal system is. Because you can come into this with pretty much any combination of medals that suits your playing style and prove to the world that it works for you. And that includes coming in with no medals, even though that's not necessarily the best use of medal points objectively, but hey, some people can make it work. I wouldn't trust myself that way, but, you know, you might be able to, so do that. But yes, really, the sooner that you do this, the more useful its rewards are, so that's kind of the trade-off here. But I'm coming into this at maximum rank, so that's a side thought as well. You would get exploration points for completing each battle, because these are still battles. It's just we're not getting exploration points, so hard to say, because we're already maxed out. We've got all the exploration points that one can get. But if you came here earlier, then you would be getting rank ups and stuff. Also, every 10 floors, or 10 rounds, I'm so used to thinking of it in terms of the Pit of 100 Trials, you are given the opportunity to heal, but you can only do this a total of 3 times across your single run. And this moment of strategy here was just me being like, wait a minute, if I stall for a turn, I can use my medals to heal TP and HP. So, yeah, I talk about my strategy in greater length in the full-fat version of this episode. What else can I discuss, really? Okay, some more technical things. You can come here. Okay, it goes through every enemy in the game, more or less. I'm fairly sure it's every enemy. And I believe you can spy them for spy cards, but only if the enemies appear as enemies. And what do I mean by that? Well, as I said, you could come here as soon as the end of Chapter 3, but you'll pretty quickly run into enemies that are from later in the game than that, and the game avoids spoiling those by having enemies turn up as silhouettes. They still behave the same, but you can't see what they are. Their names are listed as question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, and I believe if you spy those, then it'll have their HP data and defense and stuff visible on screen, but you will not get the spy card for them. So that's a fun thing you can do. I included a screenshot of that in the full version of this episode if you want to see what that looks like. One thing that I have yet to check is whether or not, and this is relevant because we're fighting some thieves here, whether or not defeating certain enemies in here counts towards the quests that require you to defeat certain numbers of enemies. So you might remember in Defiant Route there was someone who wanted us to defeat X number of thieves or thief-type enemies. There was the guy in the Termite Capital who wanted us to beat a certain number of seedlings. There was the bee in the Ant Kingdom who wanted us to beat a certain number of water striders. I think this does count towards that, but I'm not 100% certain, and if I were better about life, I would have checked that ahead of time, and I did not do that, so you're welcome. Now, I think that covers all of the technical stuff. So really, I have like 25 minutes of episode to just wax philosophical about the real world. So if you watched the full version of this episode, and I will refer to it as such because, yes, it's a bit of a trial to watch it, but this is the Cave of Trials, so fair's fair. This is the supplement that makes it a bit more palatable. What floor battle? Oh, we've already passed floor 10. I was so busy rambling I didn't even notice, so, okay, one thing at a time. One thing that I iterated upon several times in the full version of this episode was that I was recording this just before going out to attend a real-life function. I went into that recording not realizing it would take an hour and a half, and I ended up being late to said function, but it didn't actually matter, everything still turned out fine. I had dinner. Dinner rhymed with itself, by which I mean the food that I had and the drink that I had with the food, their names rhymed with each other, and I'm going to leave it to your imagination as to what those rhyming things were. Now, what's this, floor 14? I will keep calling it a floor, and child me would watch this and get really frustrated with myself going, no, Tess, they're not called floors in this game, you're so obsessed with this other game that does a similar thing, and you're using that game's terminology to refer to this one. No, get it right. Get it right was like a catchphrase of my child self. I was just that obsessive, and I hate myself for it. But yes. Completing 10 floors spawns a single tangy berry on the showroom floor just outside the arena, which you can go and collect at your convenience upon leaving the challenge. Completing 20 floors does the same thing, but with dark cherries on the opposite side. And then completing rounds 30, 40, and 50, they just hand the prize straight to you in person. So, that's how that works. We will see all of these as the footage progresses here and now. I feel like I had a thought that spirals off from that, and suddenly I'm drawing a blank. Yep, nope, it's completely gone. If you come back to this, like if you complete it once, or even if you don't complete it once, you do get berries as a reward, but one thing that you don't get is, you don't get berries or items from the battles themselves because they're holograms. So if you beat an enemy that would ordinarily drop a hard seed or a crunchy leaf or whatever, that's not going to happen here because, you know, we're in a simulator and those items... I went on that whole rant about item loot tables and such back in the Honey Factory. Those rules don't apply here because essentially these are cutscene battles, and it's 50 consecutive cutscenes with battles in between, so there is no opportunity for these things to spawn on the overworld, despawn on the overworld, and be replaced by their respective loot tables, so each round will not give you berries or items. However, if you challenge this challenge, subsequent times you do get berries for participating. Particularly, you get 10 berries for every milestone that you pass, so you get 10 berries for reaching round 10, or completing round 10, 20 for round 20, 30 for round 30, 40 for round 40, and then like 218 for round 50 for some reason. But you only get those berry rewards if it's your subsequent time challenging it. Those are instead of giving you the prizes that you get for completing it the first time. Something that I'm quite fond of, as well, is because this walks us through pretty much every regular non-boss, non-mini-boss enemy in the game, and it does so in a set order, it kind of gives us some insight as to what the quote-unquote dev-intended playthrough of this game would look like. So, we just now saw the large Chomper, which suggests that the game expects you to go and get the seed for Chompy from the Chomper Cave just before going to the far grasslands, judging by the enemies that we're seeing now. And as we'll see later on, we do start seeing enemies from Upper Snakemouth, but they don't appear until after the game has shown us enemies from Metal Lake and the Forsaken Lands, which means the game doesn't expect you to do Upper Snakemouth until before Rubber Prison. Which is interesting, because that means that I did it extremely early. In fact, if memory serves, I did it about as early as you possibly can in a single run without sequence breaking. So, I don't know, it's an interesting thing to observe. Now, I feel like I could go into... Wait, that's what a Medesfi looks like? I had completely forgotten. I remember those enemies and what they look like, and I remember the name, but I think I associate the name Madesfi with the Mantid Fly for some reason. That was a random tangent. One thing that I went into agonizing detail over in the full version of this episode is the concept of strategy and meta-strategy, which is to say, with my medal loadout specifically, there is an element of strategy in seeing a battle and thinking, I will not use TP here, and I'll try to drag it out a bit longer, because every other turn, I get 2 HP on Kabu, 2 HP on Leaf, and a bunch of TP. 4 TP, there you go. In addition to the healing and TP healing bonuses I get in between each battle. So there is a wisdom to not going all in on every single battle. But in that same vein, there is also wisdom in knowing when to use TP. And I sort of bemoaned myself live and in the moment that my strategy seemed to swing so aggressively back and forth between extreme TP conservatism and extreme hyper usage of TP. And, you know, do keep an eye on the orange counter in the top right corner of the screen, just to see how it swings pretty high and pretty low, and it's its own little soap opera. Does Tess ever run out of TP? Stay tuned and find out. And I don't know to what extent that constitutes me overcompensating, because I spent this entire series being really not smart with my TP, in the sense that it took me a very long time to train myself to view it as a resource to be used, rather than a finite resource to conserve. Because we have ways of healing it. We can heal it with items, we can heal it with strategy, we can heal it with just raw patience because we have the medals for it. And you may or may not have noticed, I did put a Meditate medal onto V, and I wasn't expecting it to pay that many dividends, but ultimately it did, and I'm glad it did, in the same way that putting the Status Mirror medal onto Leaf ended up serving me martinis, as I would say, in ways that I hadn't expected. So, in addition to this being a proving ground for demonstrating what your medal loadout of choice looks like, it can also be an interesting place to experiment with new strategies, because you're not having to worry about facing off against a giant boss that will do a load of damage in one turn. You could turn up and just beat the first 10 floors just to test out a fresh strategy with medals, and then quit if you so chose. Which brings me on to something that I meant to mention earlier. I don't remember if the flee option is an option within here. I would imagine it probably is, and it just terminates your run instantly wherever you are, and you don't get any rewards for it or whatever. But whatever the case, if your HP drops to 0 across all 3 of your team, then that doesn't give you a game over, it just boots you out of the challenge. Not that I would know. And in those circumstances, or if you reach, like, if you complete rounds 10, 20, 30, 40, yeah, just 10, 20, 30, or 40, and you choose give up rather than carry on, that does not bookmark your progress. If, for whatever reason, you quit this challenge, and then you come back to it later, you will have to start from scratch every single time. There are no checkpoints. Do not build your strategy around there being checkpoints, because there are none, and I fully understand why. I believe... There you go, Defense Exchange medal for completing 30 rounds. The secret super boss that, as I said, I'm not going into great detail about it here and now, that's going to be for a later episode. That comes after Challenge 50, and I don't think you're given the opportunity to heal. which is agonizing because round 50 is hard, and the secret round 51 is... I think it has something crazy like 4 defense and 99 HP, so, you know, good luck to you. Or good luck to me, since I'm going to have to face it at some point, unless I get someone else to do it for me. I don't know, we'll see what happens. So, on one hand, this isn't for the faint of heart if you're going for absolute completion, but it's more forgiving than perhaps you might be inclined to think, because, you know, in the span of this conversation, I've swung all the way back up to 40 TP, and now I'm back down to 15. And I recognise I'm being a bit reckless, a bit careless, but it makes up for how, for the bulk of this series, I was not reckless with TP. I'm actually using my skills for once. I should be proud of me, and instead I'm like, yeah, Tess, what do you mean you're not at full at any given moment? And, okay, I believe at this point in the full version of this episode, I had another thought about spy cards, and specifically, I think, as I said, as long as the enemy isn't a silhouette, I believe you can spy it normally. And of course, there are wasp enemies here, but at this point in the story within this Let's Play, we've reconciled with the Wasp Kingdom, so there is no wasp that we can battle in the overworld anymore. We can't fight wasp drillers, scouts, bombers, or... I could swear there's another kind, I'm forgetting the name. So, if you were to miss spying on them, you could come and do it in here. I think, anyway. So, that is a way of getting any spy cards that you've missed, bearing in mind you could also go to the Underground Tavern and buy spy card data from enemies that you may have otherwise missed, but the trade-off there is that costs berries, and you can't choose which spy card data you get. It has to be an enemy that you've battled at least once, and not got the spy card data for, and the game pools all of those together and picks one at random and gives it to you if you speak to the person who gives you that. I've not had to, because in this series I've been fully efficient in spying everyone the literal second I get the opportunity to do so. Although, that being said, we have, I believe, all but 5 of the spy cards in the game, and those last 5 belong to optional super bosses. As you might be able to guess based on the previous episode, 3 of those belong to Team Maki, that is to say Maki, Kina, and Yin. So, we'll be getting those at some point, and I'm sure I will be forced to pay the price accordingly. On a completely unrelated note, when I was originally recording this, I did sit down with myself and think, one thing that I should talk about is the dreams I've been having lately, because I do go through phases of having really vivid and peculiar dreams, and then I proceeded to not actually think of any of the dreams that I had been having. So, you know, if you go into the series expecting a dream journal, I promise and then fail to deliver. Other topics of conversation include... Surprisingly, I go on quite a bit of a tangent about Eurovision and the comments that I've received regarding it and stuff, and I go to give myself a bit of grace and not repeat what I said here and now, because I rambled. It was not very well thought through ramble, but it was a ramble nonetheless. And if you want to go and listen to that, the full episode exists. And then another tangent that I went on was on the subject of game design and how I have made games in the past, but I've set my sights on a much loftier goal, where in my free time I've been putting together a design document for a duology of games that is far more ambitious than anything I have ever made, and I need to make peace with the fact that I will probably never end up making this duology of games because it is so outside the realms of what I'm capable of, and if I were to get people on side who are capable of doing the things I'm not capable of, I would most likely need to pay them, because it would be entirely my vision and my passion project, but they're the ones doing the work. And I'm not saying it's okay to not pay someone if they're part of the passion team. I'm saying the odds of me finding someone who would do it out of the goodness of their heart because they also see the vision is highly unlikely. And fair enough, pay people what they're worth, but I don't have the budget for that. So I can't afford to get people on side who aren't natively on side. No one's natively on side because it is entirely just my vision, and I don't have the skills necessary to make it happen. So the odds of it happening are slim, and that makes me sad because it's guaranteed to be a banger. Anyway, That just there, clearing 40 floors, you get the TP Saver Medal, which you can put onto one bug to make all of their TP costs cost 1 TP less. I believe it takes 5 medal points to equip it, but when the time comes, I will put that onto Leaf, that is my plan. And it is one of the 2 extremely worthwhile rewards from here, the other one being the one from Challenge 50, but we'll get to that when we get to that. And then from that, I went into a whole tangent about, like, my life has been paralleling the life of MacPad, but not deliberately, because 2023 was the year of him doing stuff outside of his comfort zone, like directing a Broadway show and taking part in professional golf. And for me, that's been writing a novel, still in the works, by the way. Again, I go into more detail in the full version of this episode. Doing an audiobook of that novel, worrying about whether or not it's acceptable to do accents for characters in so recording an audiobook for said novel, and then also the whole thing about game design. But then also the side thought of, oh hey, I quit the thing that I'm famous for on YouTube as well in the same way that MacPat did, but that's the one thing that I did before MacPat did it. I quit Eurovision long before MacPat publicly announced his quitting of the Theory channel, so that I can own with pride. And then for a while I sort of waxed philosophical about, a lot of people seem to miss the memo that I quit Eurovision, but then I was like, well, I posted it on Twitter and not on YouTube, and I stopped using Twitter back in September, so maybe it's of little surprise that very few people saw it. But at the same time, I'm like, well, clearly if they were real fans, they would have seen, like, no. Let's not go down that route. And now I feel like I should unpick every last little stitch of what I'm actually intending to say in saying that, but then that's how my brain works anyway. Like, oh, I've said a thing. I now need to over-explain every sub-thing within that thing in order to fully communicate my meaning. And that would be tedious for all involved. But then again, tedium is the name of the game here, because, as I said, I have condensed an hour and a half of 50 consecutive battles into a regular length episode for this. And realistically, that just means speeding things up to 300%. For perspective, when I was doing the speed-up sections of Yoshi's Crafted World, that footage was sped up to 500%. So, this, all told, isn't that bad, I guess? I don't know, I feel like, even though the maths is perfectly mathsing, where these episodes are usually about 30 minutes, and something that's just under 90 minutes, speed it up 300%, you get a regular length episode. I feel like I should have to speed it up more than that. Also, another thought, just observe the haunted cloth and the warden here, and how, with its hood down, the haunted cloth looks like it should be the body to which the warden is the head, and they fit together, which then begs the question, well, what's the crawler then? Is that like the rest of the body? Its legs, perhaps? And oh, hey, the Deadlanders have started showing up, and this is fun and lovely. And if I must go on a rambling tangent about strategy, the Deadlanders are weak to Leaf's ice, but just bear in mind that Deadlander Beta is not grounded, so it is sort of difficult to hit it with ice because you sort of need to be grounded in order to be hit by Leaf's ice. So, consider that. Do I have any other points of strategy within here? Just as general advice for if you're taking on this challenge for yourself. On a meta level, don't underestimate how long it will take, because as I said, this is an investment, there are no checkpoints, you need to be able to commit to the amount of time needed to sit down and do this. And second, don't underestimate Deadlander Gammas, they will wreck house if you let them. And third, use enemy behaviour to your advantage, by which I mean, if I just take out this one golden seedling, the other one flees, and that counts as a win. The game doesn't penalise you if an enemy runs away from battle. That reminds me of something I meant to mention earlier. Despite what I initially thought, if you lose an item in this mode, in any capacity, so if you use an item, or if an enemy steals an item from you and then runs away from battle, it is given back to you, but only once you disengage from the challenge. So if you're defeated, or if you succeed, or if you quit, whatever, it's upon quitting that you're given your items back. I thought that if something was used or lost, it was used or lost forever. Because, to me, it feels more logical that, you know, the BOSS program is, like, a sciencey simulator, whereas this is ancient crystal tech simulator, so actually saying it out loud, no, it does make more sense that if your items are refunded to you in one mode, they should be refunded to you in both. And that is the case, so I said something to the contrary in the full recording, but then I made up for it by saying in post, actually, no, I was wrong about this. if you lose an item, it's given back to you again, which is good because I did not bring much in the way of healing items to this challenge, which was a stupid idea, but I stand by it. Because I'm collecting items for the recipe episode, or the recipe episode, if you will, which I won't. There's going to be an episode later down the line where I go through all the recipes that I'm missing, and I need ingredients for that, and I had some of them on hand, and that was a whole thing. Anyway, for the 50 battles, not counting the super secret bonus round, I would say this is the only one that is, like, objectively hard, and that's because hubris. I made a load of dumb decisions here, and there you go, I finally ran out of TP. It's not meant to be easy. It's meant to be a challenge. I'd say is it meant to be hard? I don't know, I would say it's fair. It's meant to be a fair challenge to test your proficiency with the battle system and whatever your medal loadout may or may not look like. But I have a strategy that works, and I think it worked in my favor, so I passed the test. And as you can see, I'm sort of building up to imply that, hey, you know, I'm talking like the battle's already won when it hasn't been won yet, except you have 3 HP left. 3 minus 5 is less than 0, so there you go. We win, that's the Cave of Trials complete, and we can breathe. Now, this footage is back to normal speed, and it is the footage that I used in the full version of this episode, so if you want to see full voice acting of these various lines and elaborate descriptions of these items such as the team ribbon, which, as I said, is the other really useful thing you can get from doing this mode, which you could put it onto Chompy, and anytime she does damage, it restores 1 TP. I intend to equip that at the earliest convenience, because, yes, we'll lose the +1 attack bestowed by the pretty ribbon, but the team ribbon is, in my opinion, worth the exchange. And also, the other prize for completing it is random mode, because, as I said, if you challenge this, it will be the same enemies in the same order every time, unless you do random mode, which shuffles the order. And there you go. The Tangy Berry was for completing 10 floors, or rounds, or whatever. The Dark Cherries were completing 20. I feel like my inventory is now overfilled by 1, but the game is fine with it, so whatever. So on that note, I guess I have been, will continue to be, Tessellating Hexagons, and I thank you for your patience if you watched the full version of this episode, and fully understand if you didn't. And in the next episode, we'll get back to slightly less time-consuming things.